What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Coach Steve Show podcast. Today, we're going to dive into Jim Harbaugh. Is Jim Harbaugh really going to leave his alma mater of Michigan after one of the, I think, his best year at Michigan? Is he going to leave and go to the NFL? His name has swirled around for different jobs. Is he going to go to the Vikings? Is it real? It may be real. We're going to talk about Jim Harbaugh and why it might be a good fit to get back to the NFL and get out of college. But is he going to do that? Is this just flirting? Is this even going to hurt him if he stays at Michigan? We're going to talk about all of that today on the Coach Steve Show podcast. Before we dive into that, please make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button on the Coach Steve Show YouTube channel. Be a friend, tell a friend, leave a comment in the comment section down below. You can listen to your podcast anywhere that you listen to your podcast. Please make sure you follow them, rate them, be a friend, tell a friend. And this podcast is also brought to you by the Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. If you head over to bellyupsports.com, you can check out all the podcasts, the blogs, affiliates, everything on there. There's something on there for everybody. So bellyupsports.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Coach Stone Football and is back to the basics, books, and drills. If you're a football coach like me and you're looking to get back to the basics, these are the perfect books for you. I have about 7 of them. His very first one was over 500 pages. There are drills you could use in youth, high school, or college. Some people's spring seasons are going to come up on them pretty quick. Some of us, the summer is going to come up on us pretty quick. And then by the time the season gets here, it's too late. So we want to be simple. We want to get back to the basics. So if you go to CoachStoneFootball.com, go to the Back to the Basics manuals, and you will never have to look up another drill again. I promise. Thank you, Coach Stone, for sponsoring the podcast. All right, let's dive in. Jim Harbaugh has been the head coach of Michigan for a little bit. A few years now. Now, this is not his first time coaching in college, of course. He had his little stint there at Stanford, and he had a quarterback named of Andrew Luck, and it did pretty well. After a few years, he had to build the Stanford program up. Then he went and did a little stint at the 49ers. Then he went to Michigan in 2015, and he just is coming off his best year. Now, the end of last year, it looked like they were going to fire him. He was going to be all over. His alma mater dream will be done. Well, it was kind of one of those situations where, there's really no one out there to get. Now, if they would have this year, there was plenty of people. If Michigan didn't do well this year, they had plenty of candidates to pick from. But then he had his best year. Now, going into this year, they cut his salary in half, if not by more, and said, you're going to have to earn the money, buddy, like the rest of us in the world. You got to earn the money. So they cut his salary. He's going to have to earn money. Some people thought it was disrespectful, but he wasn't living up to the standards that Michigan has set upon themselves since they have not won a championship since 1977. But they have this pedestal, this idea that they're supposed to be there to compete for the championships, which is a good thing to, it's a good thing to have those goals. Everybody has dreams. But at some point, you got to realize that's not you till you rebuild it, right? But you got to give a person time. Now, they've given Jim Harbaugh quite some time. But during the 90s and going into the 2000s, they've had chances, but then they've allowed other teams to really gravitate up. Ohio State's gravitated up. You have other teams that are beating them. Minnesota's getting better. Penn State's Penn State. You lost Illinois last year in the COVID year. So just things have happened. But this year they go to the playoff. They get whipped. It's okay. They lose to Georgia. It's fine. It's all good. He gets all of his raises because he made the playoff. They won the Big Ten. They beat Ohio State for the first time in a long time. But it was his first time beating Ohio State. Well, then the craziness that has happened in college football with the head coaching is happening in the NFL. There are still NFL teams that need a head coach. People got fired that probably should have been fired. People got let go after being there for a while. Jim Harbaugh's name has been thrown around for a few jobs. One of them was the Chicago Bears. I started to fall in love with this idea. Now, people are wondering, well, he hasn't done very well at Michigan. Why are people looking at Jim Harbaugh for the NFL? Well, one, he's done a good job at Michigan. A lot of teams out there, especially like my Illinois Final Illini, which we'll get there with Brent Bielema, would love to have seasons like Michigan. So this thought that Jim Harbaugh is not a good coach is crazy. But again, it's some of these people on TV that talk about this. Now, there is a standard that lives up to Michigan. There is this thing that he has to deal with, and they just never got there. But here's the thing. He was a good NFL coach. He did good things at the 49ers. So that's why his name has always gotten thrown around. It seemed like it might be a good fit for the Bears because he played quarterback there. He understands the NFL. He understands what it takes at the Chicago Bears. So that felt like a good fit, but the Bears chose to go a different direction. Whether they interviewed Harbaugh or not, we may never know. But now his name got thrown around for Oakland because he's friends with people in the office. Well, then they hired Josh McDaniels. So now we're starting, you're starting to wonder, is he just going to stay at Michigan because he feels like he's got a good thing going? Well, then Miami's talking to him. You hear that? Well, then now it seems like the Vikings are really pushing this. They've flown him out. They're going to go out and talk to him as well. It seems like when that starts happening, it's one thing, some of these college coaches, especially Jim Harbaugh, he understands how the NFL works. His brother coaches at Baltimore. And he coached in it, obviously played in it, but with his brother being in the NFL, he understands the game. He understands the system. He understands how it works. So it's one thing for them to listen. They're going to listen. When an NFL team comes talking to you, you're going to listen. You're going to figure out what you want from them and have this conversation because it is the NFL. But then you've got to wonder, do you make more money in college, which a lot of coaches do make more money in college when they're the top. But does it make sense for Jim Harbaugh to go back? And you don't have these conversations if you don't think about it, if you're not quite thinking about it. So right now, Michigan fans, players, and your front office are sitting here going, well, they're seeing these reports of him talking to the Minnesota Vikings. Is he going to leave Michigan? And is he the right fit? And does it make sense for him to go back to the NFL? Now, again, he didn't do too bad with his stint at the 49ers. Did not do bad. First time, 2011, he took over. They went 13-3. Pretty good, right? Next year, they go 11-4. They're the NFC champs, make the Super Bowl, lose, to the Ravens. It is what it is. They go 12-4 the following year. They don't make it back. Then his final year goes 8-8. Now that was with the decline of, Colin Kaepernick because it wasn't playing well, different things like that. And then his alma mater of Michigan's open, so he feels like that's a challenge he's going to go on and take. And then if you want to look back at his college career when he was at Stanford, it was okay. We'll look at his whole stint of college. He took over Stanford in 2007. Now, Stanford, sometimes they're good at football, sometimes they're not. But he had to build that program up. They went 4-8 his first year, then 5-7, 8-5, and then 12-1. So, like I've talked about before, when you talk about college coaching, you have to see some consistency each and every year. And even I talked about with the Bears and Matt Nagy, where you have to get some consistency. And that's why when you go 12-4 one year, then we go 8-8, 8-8, and then we only won 5 or 6 games. That's not going forward. So with Jim Harbaugh, that's what you saw him do at Stanford. Then he did his little stint, a couple of years with the 49ers. Then he comes to Michigan. Now, to me, Michigan time, again, Michigan has this standard and, whatever. They want to live in 1997. And that's okay. You want to live that way. You want to have that standard of them trying to get to the big time. They want to win the championship. It's pretty good. But a lot of this record that he had at Michigan, your team, especially mine, would love to have. So 10-3 his first year, 10-3 the next year at Michigan, pretty good, right? Then they go 8-5. It was a little rough year. Then they get back to that 10-3. People are starting to say he's an average coach. He's not going to win the Big Ten. Then they go 9-4, and this is where the talks really started to spin on his job. But then the COVID year hit, went 2-7. They had a big win over Minnesota, and then it just kind of, fizzled out. Even my Illinois team beat them. Then he has his best year at 12-2. And some people thought it was disrespectful to cut his salary. I didn't see it that way because the man has made so much money. I mean, he just gave some of his bonuses to the athletic department that lost money due to COVID. So, I mean, seems like a good guy. He done well at Michigan. I think he's done pretty well, in my opinion. His college career, he's 90-45, over being a head coach of 11 years, 4 years at Stanford, 7 at Michigan. Stanford, he was 29-21. Michigan, he's been 61-24. But where it's interesting is, like I said, when you have many of conversations with the Minnesota Vikings, like he has when you've had a couple conversations, he's really thinking about it. As long as these reports are true, we've seen reports not be true. We've seen the Tom Brady debacle. We've seen, some of these interviews that don't really happen. Big time, like last summer with Aaron Rodgers, when they're saying this, or that, where Aaron Rodgers has never even said that before in his life. So you have some of these going on. So I don't know what anybody else thinks. I think he's had a good time at Michigan. I think he's done pretty good. So now it's, why does he want to, if he wants to go back to the NFL? Well, let's just break it down. NFL obviously is it's a business. Now, college football, it's a business. It might as well be, the minor league for the NFL. This USFL and XFL stuff will probably be like a minor league team, but college football is right up there. It's a business. NFL, and there's a lot of pressure. We've seen coaches get fired after 2 years. We've seen it 1 year because they get sticky fingers, like Urban Meyer. They get that sticky fingers with the donut they eat, and it just gets stuck on somebody, and it looks like something's happening at a distillery and in Ohio and all that stuff. But we digress away from that. So they get fired because it's a business. They're getting paid, players getting paid millions upon millions of dollars. Now, the coaches aren't getting paid that much, but they're making a good living. You probably get paid more in the college. That's why you don't see Lincoln Riley going. He gets paid lots and lots of money, gets what he wants. Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. I don't coach in college. I have not coached in college. I coach in high school, but I have become friends with college coaches. I have them on the podcast. I've talked to them outside of how their life works. Their life is football 24/7 as well as NFL, but in college, you've got to go recruit kids. So you have to watch film on all these kids. Okay, so you're sitting there watching film. Now, he's got assistants to do this, but since he's the head football coach, and he's got to give the thumbs up and the stamp of approval for the stuff, he has to know you have to recruit. So you have to watch film on all these kids. You got to look at your weaknesses or where you got to get these scholarships. Then you got to talk to them. Then you got to talk to mom. Then you got to talk to dad. Then you got to talk to grandma. You got to talk to grandpa. Then you got to talk to the girlfriend. You got to talk to the boyfriend, whoever. You have to talk to the other side. And then you try to convince them why in the world they need to come to your university. You need to convince them why you're the coach for them. And you've got to convince them away from Michigan State. You got to get them to leave. Yeah, you don't want to go to Ohio State, or man, you don't want to go to Michigan State. Oh, you're thinking about going where? Man, like you've got to recruit, and it's nonstop. That comment that Dan Mullen made, like it's not recruiting season. Oh boy, it's recruiting season all the time for college, all the time. So you're recruiting. The amount of film on each kid you're watching to recruit all the time. Staying in contact when you're allowed to text, when you're allowed to call, you're allowed to go. I'm not saying he doesn't like this, but that's part of it. Okay. Then on top of it, as being a head coach, you've got to deal with all the assistants, and then you've got a lot of people to hire. If they're leaving to take head jobs all the time, you're always doing that. Look at what Nick Saban goes through. It's a grind. Okay. And then on top of it in college, now you're dealing with NIL stuff. Now these kids, not all over. That NIL may be a whole other different podcast, but you've got some guys, and I've got to believe there's Michigan donors going to pay some of these Michigan players. That now he has to deal with that. He's got to deal with players getting paid, not by him, but by somebody else. That's another thing he's got to deal with. The amount of rules and the NCAA rules that they have to abide by in recruiting and abide by this is ridiculous. I'll never forget. We were in class in school and I walked on to play, but, there were rules where if you're in a class and you're working a group, okay, and you want to go meet at a restaurant, I don't know, B-Dubs. Let's just say we're going to get wings. We're going to go to B-Dubs. I know that's not probably the first place of wings, but B-Dubs. And you go and someone pays for that football player's meal because he's in that group. That's illegal because now it was considered a bribe. Now I think it's changed since then, but at the time they couldn't do that. He couldn't accept a meal being paid for him, even by a classmate where you're in a group. It doesn't make sense. But those are the amount of rules that he has to do. And then with the transfer portal on top of it, if you've got players leaving, he's got to try to convince them to stay. He's got to try, to do all this stuff. Okay. Then he's got to deal with boosters. He's got to deal with administration. He's got to deal with the athletic director. He's got to deal with this. He's got to deal with that. Not saying he doesn't like it, but there's a lot of things going on, especially as a head coach, where you're dealing with this. And then on top of that, the other amount of film you're watching on the team you're going to play ahead of time, the amount of game plan you have to sit in the meetings with offense and defense and special teams. Then you got to do practice planning. Okay. Then you got to do press conferences. Then you've got to do appearances. So a lot goes on. Not saying it doesn't happen in the NFL, but in college, you're adding on top of it. Now, when you get to the NFL, you're going to deal with professionals. Okay. And he understands how to deal with professionals. He understands how to deal with adults. In the NFL, when you're the head coach, you've got guys doing the X's and O's for you. You set the standard, and then there's that. You're not dealing with all those boosters and stuff, okay? Because the money's coming from ticket sales, the money's coming from jerseys, the money's coming from the top of the NFL. You're just going to deal with the owner and the GM. It's pretty much it. Then when you want guys, you're going to watch film on them, but you don't have to do it quite as much. Yes, you do have to try to convince some players to come to you, but if you can pay a player, they're going to come. You know what I mean? Like, hey, this guy ain't going to sign me. This team's going to sign me. So you've got different pressures is what I'm trying to say. Each one is just different pressures. Sometimes there seems to be more in college. That's why sometimes you see these guys go to the NFL. It's like Chip Kelly's going to the NFL and everything else. The one thing, though, when you get to the NFL, you can have a good year. And the next year, when you have a bad year, it's going to come down hard on you. College, you could have a good year. The next year, you could have not really a good year. It won't come down on you as hard unless you're Alabama or something. Unless you're really the creme of the creme. But if you're just a average football team in college, have a good year, and the next year you don't, kind of come down on you, okay? I'm not saying NFL is better than college, but there's different pressures, but you got to weigh those pressures. You got to weigh what's going on, okay? So I think that's why he is talking to the Vikings, okay? Now, then there comes the next challenge. Does he feel like he's taken Michigan as far as he can go? Because he's inside, man. Is he sitting there going, it's hard to win a national title because of how it's set up with this playoff. Man, it's tough to win a national championship when you've got all this stuff going on. Man, if I go to the Vikings NFL and I'm in the NFC North and you got some players at the Vikings and we can sign some guys, maybe that's what he's thinking. It makes sense for him to go to the Vikings. If he goes to the Vikings, Kirk Cousins on one of his last year of his contract, I think he's staying there. I don't think Kirk Cousins is the guy. I don't think he's this great time elite quarterback, but he has flashes. But Jim Harbaugh at San Francisco got Kirk Cousins to play a little bit. I believe Alex Smith might have been there too. Got him to play. He got Andrew Luck to play at Stanford. Now Michigan, that's kind of been, he's supposed to be this Michigan, development of quarterback. But when you got all the other stuff to deal with, maybe he doesn't get the exact same thing. If he goes to the NFL, might be able to make that type of move. Might be able to get a quarterback to play well. And I think he wants another challenge. I think he wants to bring a national championship to Michigan. But I think he understands this landscape of recruiting is just a pressure maybe he doesn't want to deal with right now. Or maybe he goes, you know what? I want to win a Super Bowl. Like, it's possible. It's possible to win a Super Bowl. Look at what the Bengals have done. So it's possible if I get the right guys around me with the Vikings, we're in the NFC North. If Aaron Rodgers leaves, that opens up the door. So it's very possible to get him in there and say, you know what, I can try to win a Super Bowl. I've won the Big Ten. I beat Ohio State. I'm going to go out on top, in his term of Michigan and get my butt back to the NFL where he has had success and he understands it. And he has family connections with his brother at Baltimore. So he understands it. And again, then the pressure of recruiting comes off. You don't have to quite convince. And then in the draft, you can just draft and say, you're on the team. There's guys rolling around out there and you just talk to them. You try to get them to buy in, but then you just sign them, you pay them, you get them there. So it's different. He can just look at an offense and have more input on offense where he doesn't have to. He could get this big-time professional. Fangio might go with him to the Vikings. That was his defensive coordinator before they worked together at San Francisco. So they might be, if that happens, and maybe that's why they keep talking, like, can you bring him? And if they get him up in Minnesota, my God, it's going to turn around real quick. That's why I wanted him to go to the Bears. He's a great CEO type, and he really learned that this year at Michigan. If you notice, he started to step back and let other guys do it. And when that happens, and he's the CEO and he's just steering the ship, it worked, and looked what happened. And I believe that's what he was going to do with the Bears if the Bears were able to grab him, or if he wanted to go there. I think he could do well at the Vikings. And I say that because I'm a Bears fan, and if he goes to NFC North, it would just be a battle. It's already a battle, but that's going to be a big-time battle with Jim Harbaugh. He's pretty good at getting guys to play hard. I think it just makes sense with the pieces that are there. They need, I'm not saying they had a horrible head coach before, but what I am saying is they need to be rejuvenized. Jim Harbaugh is a very energetic coach. He is running around. He's always in cleats. He's ready to play, man. He's in cleats and gloves. He is ready to go. And I think that's kind of what the Vikings are looking for. They need a sustainable. They need a culture. They need someone to come in to be energetic, to get them ready to play, to get them ready to go. So I think it makes sense for him to go to the Vikings. It just makes sense. And so I'm all on board with him going to the Vikings. The Dolphins, maybe. I just think that with the quarterback situation there, health issues with them, then especially what's been going on where it's been reported that they wanted to pay $100,000 to Coach Flores to throw a game. I don't know if he wants to touch that with the Raiders job gone. I think he wants to look at this. Now, if he stays at Michigan, fine. He stays at Michigan. They're going to compete this year. They're going to compete to beat Ohio State. They're going to be pretty good. So I think that's another thing he's going to weigh on. It's not about money. He's got all the money he needs. But now it's the next challenge. Now, I know it's like, well, he's got to win a national championship. He's got to win a national championship. And I know that's weighing on his mind. Like, he wants to bring a championship to Michigan. And I don't think he's sitting there saying what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it. He has to look at the landscape of college football and say, okay, we could battle like the old days and try to get to the top two and get to the national title. Now you've got just a 4-team playoff where we automatically got to play one of the top teams instead of, well, we're number 4 in the nation or number 3 in the nation. And if we get to a normal playoff, we can play a bottom team and work our way and battle and claw and win and try to get to that national title. So the way it's set up, the way the SEC looks, just somehow, some way that Ohio State keeps winning. So I think he's looking at that. He's looking at it until they can get some kind of salary cap on this NAIL stuff. He's looking at the transfer portal. So maybe he goes, it's going to be hard to leave my alma mater, but I'm leaving it in a better spot than when I found it. And I'm going to go to the NFL and just finish out a career. He's probably got a long career left, but go to the NFL and just try it again. And then he could find a job. I know that Michigan's his alma mater, and he may not want to go back to a college, but if it didn't work out in the NFL, he'd find another job in the NFL, or he could find another college job and turn around. So there's stuff for him. So all it comes down to Jim Harbaugh, because we don't know. We don't know what's going through his mind. We don't know what's being talked about at home. But it comes down to, does he want to stay at Michigan because he loves Michigan? Does he feel like, though, the moment he starts losing, because it was talked about this year, the moment they won't win, and they end up winning this year, but the moment they don't, you're gone, buddy. Does he feel that way, or does he feel like he can go to the Vikings? And does he have confidence in that when he gets there? Hey, man, you're going to get 4 or 5 years. Like, we understand. There's pieces here, but we understand that you're going to get some time. Because next year, if Michigan starts to lose, how much did this winning season actually buy him at Michigan? Does he feel like his time's already gone and he's living on borrowed time because of the pay cut he had to take? Or is Michigan going to come at him with an offer? Is this just a leverage to say Michigan's got to give him some money? I almost feel like the moment if they start losing again at Michigan, he's gone. And when that happens during the season, now you've got to wait for a job. So is this a job that he wants? I figured he'd want to go to the Raiders. Maybe he just didn't get the feel for it. Maybe he didn't know. I don't know. But those are the things Jim Harbaugh has to think about and make that decision. I think if he goes, I don't really know he'd bring as an offensive coordinator, but if he can get Fangio to be there, my God, that defense would turn around a heartbeat, because you saw what he did with Chicago. You saw what he did with the 49ers the first time, and you saw what he did with the Broncos, even though he lost his job. That defense was top-notch. That was good. That's what held them in games. You want to talk about a defense holding people in games like they do with Jimmy G. You want to talk about that? Look at the Broncos. The Broncos are a couple playmakers and a quarterback away from being pretty good. Just depends on who they're going to have on defense. If Fangio is their defense coordinator and you buy Aaron Rodgers, that's a Super Bowl caliber team. But Jim Harbaugh to the Vikings makes total sense. And I would not be shocked if we see it, especially because they're having these conversations. I would not be shocked if we saw Jim Harbaugh tomorrow or at some point here saying that he's with the Vikings with the conversations they're having. But I will also not be shocked if maybe the Dolphins. That's another one. I just kind of like the Vikings more. But he's got to look at it from an upside. Do I have the upside with the Dolphins or I have the upside with the Vikings? I don't know. You have a better quarterback with the Vikings, I think. Now, Tua has an upside, but with the injury-prone stuff, maybe you're better off going to the Vikings. But I also would not be shocked if he stays with Michigan. Got a good thing going. But the thing you're going to risk with staying with Michigan, do they trust you enough to keep you around if you don't have that great of a year? And define a great year. What if they go 10-3 again or 10-2? And they don't make the playoff. Do they get rid of him? Now, if they go like 6 wins, yeah, they probably get rid of him. So those are things he's got to think about. He's got to talk to Michigan and kind of get a feel for what they're doing and how they feel about it. Maybe he already does. And that's why he's talking to the Vikings. But I think Jim Harbaugh is a good NFL coach. I think he could finish off his time being in the NFL and he can get a college job again if he really wants to. I don't think he's been that bad at Michigan like everybody else proclaims and everything else. Maybe he can get to the Vikings and connections with 49ers, get Jimmy G over there. Maybe. When I talked about Jimmy G and I was live on Colorcast, somebody said Vikings are a dark horse to get him, so watch out. Maybe this is what starts it. Who knows? Quarterback type of coach, Jimmy G. Guy that understands college. Jimmy G understand that and incorporate it. That'd be pretty good. So I think it makes sense for Jim Harbaugh to go to the Vikings. I would not be surprised if you see, I think it's going to be the Vikings or Michigan. I don't see him going to Miami. I don't see him going to Jacksonville. I don't think he wants any part of that mess. He wants to go somewhere that has been competing a little bit. Then he's got to look at saying, I got to play the Bears. I got to play the Packers. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers is gone. Maybe that's what he's waiting on too, to see if Rodgers leaves. And then you got to play the Lions, and we know about the Lions. So that wraps up this episode. I want to talk about Jim Harbaugh real quick. Again, like and subscribe. Rate and follow the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Check out all the affiliates in the description below. Be a friend, tell a friend, all that good stuff. Check out all the other episodes of the Coach Steve Show podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Coach Steve. This has been another episode, and we are out of here.